So let me finish doing some of this boring part, walking you through the coding. I really hope that you have some time tomorrow in the morning, if not tonight, to go through it in the Google Drive. Just press enter and see it runs, change, of course. I am just assuming that you already know enough to know that you need to change, for instance, this part, no? The CD part is in my file, so you have to change it. And maybe tomorrow we can have a few questions, but mostly tomorrow we are going to let you discuss your cases, your choice sets, and we are going to give you feedback. Hopefully everyone comes with ideas that we can destroy and make them better. That's the goal. Okay, so I told you we run the models, we see them, we interpret them as I did, slowly but surely. Then I ran these lines for every model to estimate the betas, the ones that I just showed you, the distributions, which are interpreted as the parameters that are attached to each of you. So just for you to understand what I mean by those betas, let me open the data file. Oh, nice. I'm going to forever remember this. Yeah. So this is what I mean by the betas, right? Like once you run the model for every person in the data set, that green ML is the parameter associated with how much you prefer having green that comes from the mixed logit model, or for parking, or for facade, or for lane. And then MLC, green MLC, is the parameter that arises from the model that is the mixed logit with correlation. So I have the two there. And I have one for every person and one for every parameter. Of course, with the exception of price when you run the price fix. Look, I have them for them, for all of them. How many people do I have there? 166 people. Okay. So with these coefficients, I can do something super cool. All these lines is so that I put all my betas together. And then I create the data sets called betas. Then with these lines, I am doing graphs of the distribution of the parameters, which are the ones that I showed to you before. I count how many are in the positive and the negative, which is what I told you before, 60-40, I think. But then I can calculate the marginal rates of substitution, which is what Charu and Sangeeta explained to you before. If you take, let's assume for the time being that you have a price in the discrete choice experiment. If you take the parameter of any one of the attributes, the parameter associated with any one of the attributes, and divide it by the negative of the beta of the parameter of the beta of the price of the parameter of the price, you get the marginal rate of substitution between that parameter and money, or what we call willingness to pay. So that's what I'm doing here. Because in this example, I do not have money, I prefer to keep calling them, generally speaking, marginal rate of substitution. So here I am calculating the marginal rate of substitution that arrives from the mixed logit model without correlation between green and parking. One of the reasons why I'm converted the parking in percentages is so that actually I can interpret this practically as elasticities. Is the change, the percentage change, no? How much percentage change you want given that you are giving a 1% of parking. That's why I'm calculating this, elasticities. For those of you who are very good at the microeconomics, these are elasticities. So I am calculating the elasticity of substitution between greening and parking space. And the next one is between greening and facade space. And then the last one is a substitution between greening and presence or absence of road lane reduction. Those are for those that come from the model without correlation. Then these are those that come from the model with correlation. And then I am going to graph them. All this is the graphing, okay? So let me show them to you. Just for you to keep in mind, the ones that I showed you before are the parameters coming from the model directly. But they don't have interpretation, but with the sign. That's why I only talk about, well, some of them are in the left, some of them are in the right to the zero, but that's all. These have interpretation. Let's start with facade. This is the marginal rate of substitution between green space and facade space, or as I told you, because they are in percentages, these are elasticities. And then here is probably more obvious what I was telling you before. For 50% of the people, or 50% of the density, not the people, 50% of the density, in both of the distributions, it's even more clearer here, have a negative marginal rate of substitution and have a positive marginal rate of substitution. This is a very contentious topic. Let me present the other one and we interpret the parking. There. Parking. Clearly there, the highest percentage of the density is in the right. Right? There, people are willing to trade there. So, if I remember correctly, I don't have the number right now, but you can see, for instance, around here is like 2. Yeah, it was around 2. So for every, so if the average is 2, for every percentage of parking space that they give up, they are asking for 2% of increase in green. So twice as much. I have not talked to my colleagues. We have to discuss this. I don't know whether this is asking too much or too little. I need to see whether it's possible to cover that they are asking for. But that is the rate of substitution of the people responding, which again gives me the excuse to link it to policy. Let's imagine that when I go with my colleague, one of them is psychologist, the other one is social worker, and I think they are working with the person who is in charge of nature-based solutions. The basic public policy conversation is this simple. As economist, I am calculating that we can take off 1% of parking spaces as long as we can guarantee that we are going to increase in 2% the green. So the question to the person who is expert in the nature-based solutions is, can we do that? That is how powerful these numbers are. I want to emphasize on that. It gives you the parameter that allows you a meaningful, straightforward conversation with other disciplines. In this case, with the person who is in charge of greening urban spaces, right? But it could be a marine biologist, it could be an ecologist, it could be a landscape ecologist. As long as the number that you are obtaining is a parameter that allows that communication. So I am not expecting you to have it that clear in your first trial, but try to think a little bit on that. What will be the parameter that I get from my discrete choice experiment, and what is the professional that can answer the question whether the preference of the people in my sample are reasonable or they are just very unreasonable and nothing that we do are ever going to give them 2% of green for 1% of parking. Because basically that's what we are obtaining there. How much do we need to come forward to convince them to give up parking? If we have the 2%, these numbers say, well, they are going to come forward. That is how you want to start interpreting your numbers coming from your discrete choice experiments. Okay, let me just show you one more line. Something I wanted to show you. Facade. There is less obvious. Facade. Okay. So up to there, remember what I told you at the very beginning. You don't want to talk or think about respondent or individual specific characteristics at the very beginning. Right now, we have not been even mentioned whether this is for richer, for poorer, for educated. We haven't mentioned nothing about that. This is what happens in general, in the general distribution, the general preferences. Now, I want to take advantage of this figure to start motivating how you could address potential differences in preferences that are associated with the individual characteristics. Granted, you will see later on that even when this, I'm going to be doing some fancy latent class analysis, it comes less interesting than I was hoping, but I think that the storyline is pretty. So I'm going to keep in this one, and then later I probably go back to our work in transportation. But basically, I want to give you an intuition about what is a latent class model or what is a finite mixture model. I like to call it finite mixture model, as it is actually technically called, because finite mixtures mean what it means. You have a distribution, and that distribution, that empirical distribution, really cannot be represented by one distribution or one family of distributions. But instead, it can be represented by a combination or a mixture of distribution. And it's finite in the sense that it's a number that is finite. It can be represented by mixing by mixing 2, 3, 4, 5 distributions. After you have 10 distributions, that is not a finite mixture anymore. Right? It becomes very continuous. But how do you know when some distribution could be represented by a mixture? As I told you before, when you have bimodality or multimodality in a distribution, suspect that you need to test for the presence of finite mixture distributions. So when I saw this distribution of preferences for facade, so with my experience, I thought, finite mixture. Why? Because what we have here is not a distribution that goes like this, but we have two distributions that go like this. Look. Do you see it? That's what you have there. And notice how the cool thing here is that the two models tell us the same story. There are two distributions here. You could potentially represent these preferences better if instead of trying to represent them with one normal distribution, you try to represent them with two normal distributions that have different means. One is going to have a mean around here in the negative, and the other one is going to have a mean around here in the positive. And that in itself is already telling us part of the storyline that I was telling you before. We have a group of people that don't like to give up facade, or are not willing, or are very unhappy, which will be these ones. And we have a group of people that more or less are happier of giving up. So that is the motivation to run a latent class model of ordinal least squares, which is different of what we did in the paper with Char. Here, what we are doing is we run the mixed logit, we graph and we study the distribution of the parameters. We kind of suspect for latent class, for presence of latent classes, or for the need for finding mixtures, and then we go and run. Remember, you have all access to this in the, so go and check it. This is how you run after I graphed. All these lines are for graphing. Two-way. Oh, sorry. Here. Two-way. And then I went and I said, okay, let's run a regression. Here it is. On each one of those marginal rates of substitution. We are going to pay attention to the one between green and facade just for purpose of focusing. Then I run the regression and I will show you that, not surprisingly, look, green facade is this one. But for the purpose of the argument, check how when you run an OLS, a simple OLS, trying to explain the marginal rate of substitution of between green and facade, nothing becomes significant. It doesn't matter whether you are older than 54, if you are female, single person household, 2 or more cars at home, which I thought that should matter at some point, and if you are homeowner, nothing is significant. And the reason is the distribution that we just saw. Nothing is going to be significant when you have a distribution that doesn't come from a normal distribution, but from a binormal distribution. That is what motivates two classes mixture model, which is why we estimate this model. So here we estimated the OLS. All this is OLS. Nothing is significant. And then this is the line for when you run a finite mixture model. The command is FMM. The 2 in this case means 2 classes. And I really like this command because the rest is the same that if you were going to run a OLS. It's the same line. The important thing with this command is very flexible, that lets you run finite mixture models of any specification that you wish. Poisson, binomial, any specification. So you could test different types of specifications. And then here you say predict, please, the posterior probabilities. And I am going to use the posterior probabilities to assign people into classes, depending on the probability. So there I'm going to stop a little bit before I show you the results, to give you a little bit of the taste of the EM algorithm. So whenever you have the intuition that I try to motivate to you with those graphs, and you run a finite mixture model, the EM algorithm it's an iterative algorithm that is very intuitive, but because it's iterative, it's going to take forever. Why? Imagine that I am suspecting that that I can group you into groups of preferences, okay? For chocolate. Half of you don't like chocolate, and half of you love chocolate. Let's see if I can do that, right? Anyway, so the way to start this expected maximization algorithm is by simply randomly allocating half of you in this side and half of you in this side, and say, how does the likelihood function looks? It looks kind of crappy. I'm going to take some of you to this side and some of you to this side. How does it look? Is it improving? Yes. Oh, then I'm going to keep doing this until the likelihood function looks like it's reaching its highest point. The problem with that idea or that implementation is that if you start in the wrong point, if you start and then you pass already the point of maximization, you get lost in the nothingness. It just keeps running and running and running and running. Or if you started too early in the maximum likelihood function, it takes 3 days to reach the highest point. But that is the general idea. The general idea is I'm going to reorder you, and I'm going to guess if that is the right ordering. When I say how does it look in terms of fitting, you have to have in mind this distribution that I just gave you, that I just showed you. Once I reallocate you, and I say, okay, I want to see if with you here and with you here, your preferences are, if I draw your preferences, does it fit well this pair? Does it fit this well? Ah, no, this is another one. Does it fit well the two supposedly existing distributions here? And then I stop when I am able to fit. So the method assigns probabilities of you belonging to each of the classes. For you, I'm going to have the probability that you belong to class 1, that is 0.7, and therefore the probability that you belong to class 2 is 0.3, right? Because you can only have belong to one or the other. So what I do is once I run the model and I say, okay, the model says that I got the best fit, is that if you are with 70% part of class 2, I assign you to class 2. If you are with 30%, with 80% in class 1, I assign you to class 1, and so on. I do that a posteriori with the posterior probabilities that come from the model. That step has its implications. It's not because it's based on probabilities, and sometimes I am doing it with probability 51%, right? So it has some problems when I assign you to class 2 just because you have 51% of probability to be in class 2 instead of 49, no? But granted that, I want you to see what comes when I do that, and then I will show you the regressions. Okay. So this is how it looks when I don't do latent class models. This is for everyone. This is the one that I showed you. This is the marginal radius of substitution between green space and facade. And this is how it looks when I use latent class models. I have one group that behaves like this, and I have one group that behaves like this. Does it improve my understanding of the preferences? I don't know. You tell me. I'm going to show you the results. Let me see if I can explain them. No, this is green parking. Oh. Here. This is the one. So what happens is for the case of facade, there are two classes, and the people who is in a single person household is less likely to be in class 1. And the people who have 2 or more cars are less likely to be in class 1. And the people who is a homeowner is less likely to be in class 1. So I am obtaining the chances that you belong to class 1 or to class 2. Now, What comes later depends a lot of interpretation. What does that mean? Does it mean that the people who have more cars, that have more cars also like their facade? I don't know. To me, the important result here was this. The people that dislike to give up facade are the ones that are homeowners, which makes sense. If you are renting, you're like, sure, whatever. But if you are homeowner, you were like, no, I don't want to put anything in my facade. It's my facade. My house is going to be losing value. These, for instance, the fact that they are at the same time the ones that have 2 or more cars kind of makes sense. But in this case, it's more association than explanation, I think. But at this stage, this becomes very subjective, the one who has to be interpreting this, and I haven't sat with my colleague, is the one that really knows the context at this stage. Because I don't know exactly what to do with that. That's kind of my message. My message is, we can do it, I can do it. I'm the econometrician here. There, boom. The interpretation at this stage cannot be done by myself. You have to get it back with your colleague that knows the very context, so that she tells me, what does this mean? I kind of am making sense of this, but I am not making sense of these ones. For that, we need to know the context. So that's how I wanted to motivate the use of, once you do your conditional logit, you run your mixed logit, you pick between your mixed logit correlated or not correlated, you graph your preferences, you try to see whether you should be explaining those preferences with socioeconomic, with individual characteristics, either with an OLS or with a finite mixture model that explains this kind of grouping. But that is the stage at which we include individual specific characteristics, in contrast to the regular OLS or the regular logit that puts the individual specific characteristics in the equation. Here, you first analyze whether people react to your discrete choice experiment, and later on, you try to see how that reaction depends on the individual specific characteristics. This is one method. We implemented a different method with Charu. There are other papers I have used that implement a different method. My main point is, do not try to explore this individual specific variation in the conditional logit or mixed logit, because you are going to run into much trouble, and it is not worth, because it's not that intuitive that it should be done. I'm going to present to you one more example of what we did with one. There was one initial question. I don't remember who made this question, or I don't remember if I am actually making it up and I only interpreted it. But what are the welfare measures of interest? That's how I interpreted the question that someone asked. How do you know whether you want to study the marginal willingness to pay, or whether you want to study the willingness to pay for what? One of the interesting things is, with the discrete choice experiment, you are always going to be able to obtain marginal willingness to pay. Right now, my thing is getting tired. If the computer is getting tired, I guess we are getting even more tired. But basically, what we do in this discrete choice experiment, we went to the Peruvian Amazon, and we asked the leader of the indigenous community, as a representative of the indigenous community, to evaluate whether he thought that his or her community were going to be interested in these contracts. Option A, option B, option C are contracts. The option C is the current situation. The option A and B are ways that the community could obtain a land title for the land that they have and have had for any number of years, but they don't have a land title. I bring this example because it's the first example of doing a discrete choice experiment in land titling studies. Economists have been studying the importance of land titling since 1980 at least. I remember doing my literature review, and I remember a lot of papers since 1980. And they used to do it in the regular econometric way, and then later on they started doing experiments. You give titles here and you don't give titles there, and then you come back 5 years later. But the motivation of this discrete choice experiment is doing that type of experiment is very expensive, and two, usually it requires the coordination with the specific government, and you never know in those contexts whether the government 5 years later is going to still be there or is going to want you to come back and keep the study. Actually, we did this in the context of doing the baseline to implement a titling program in Peru, and 2 years later it vanished. We were not able to implement it. So at least we have an estimate of how much the leader of that community think that having a title is worth, which is an approximation. If it is not the revealed one, it's an approximation to how much titling is worth for the communities. That is the goal of this. So we told them, well, you could be paying this monetary cost per year for 5 years. This will be the quantity that will be titled, either what you have currently or 20% more, and we also increased it for 40.
So,
yes.
This title we're talking about?
It's a land title. If the government was going to provide you with a title, you could obtain it, paying this much for 5 years.
Okay, so it's ownership right?
Ownership is private. Well, actually, that's a good question. It will include the community owning the land,
Not individual, but the community.
and the parcels owned individually. So they will have a communal property and individual property on what they are working today.
So this is Peru.
Peru, in the Peruvian Amazon.
So before this, they didn't have a title?
Not there. They have,
Any system of household responsibility system, like where all the land is owned by a community,
yeah,
by government?
not by the government, by the community. What happens is they have owned it in the way that we call traditional rights, which is basically when the Spaniards came, someone said, well, we own this, and then the Spaniards respected that, and since then it has been like that. But if you go today and you try to ask for a title like today, there is no such a thing. So it's generating a lot of problems, because there is no clear delimitation, there is no clear measurement and all that. In that context is that they are trying to put this title. Very importantly, in that context is whether the title was going to include or not land that they consider traditional uses, which include magical purposes or ritual purposes, that kind of traditional use, and it's very important that it is included in the land titling.
Thank you. Just asking out of curiosity, whether you surveyed community heads here or individual households? So how you did this survey?
We went for community leaders in the moment that they were. The question was, imagine that you call for a community meeting, and you were presented to these options. Which one do you think that the community will go for in that meeting? That, for instance, is a good question, because we have to rely on the fact that giving us the answer that he thinks the community is going to give and not his answer, which is shady. No? And we didn't implemented questions to make sure that we didn't know how to make sure that he was saying that what the community would have wanted. We discussed whether we should go for households, but because it included a big component of community owning, it needed to be at the meeting level. We discussed whether we should actually go and there is this discrete choice experiment that are called collective discrete choice experiments, I think, that basically you put the discrete choice experiment in the table and you put everyone to sit and to discuss and to then come up with an agreement on which of those options they will choose. There are a few papers doing that. We thought that the topic was not deemed to be, we will be creating more problems than solutions if we were going to be putting communities to discuss this. So we thought, now let's just go for the head. That's why we did that. The component of whether they will include traditional land, that was an important attribute. The other one, of course, duration. Do you want it in 1 year or in 5 years? Or duration that the process takes. And then an important one was, that's one we identified through focus groups. They didn't trust the government too much, so they will want to have, some of them, representative of the regional indigenous federation in the team, discussing the title, so that they had more trust or not on the exercise. So what I wanted to show you is by the end, of course, we do the same analysis that I presented to you, right? Mixed logit, and then after the mixed logit, we explain willingness to pay with characteristics of the community and the respondent. Now, this thing is not working, but in this case, we didn't explain marginal willingness to pay. It doesn't make sense to explain the marginal willingness to pay for 1 year save, for included or not included in the territory. What we did was we calculated the willingness to pay for the best contract. So the contract where they will get at least the territory that I said is theirs, they will get the traditional land title, they will get it in 1 year, and they will get it with people representing them in the team. We added the marginal willingness to pay. We calculated the willingness to pay for that contract, and that is the one that became the dependent variable in our regression, like the one that I presented to you before, the OLS. In that case, we didn't do latent class model. If this thing was working, I will show you how there is also a very good distribution of preferences, but I think I will have to restart it because, let me try the control alt.
Maybe too many files are open.
Yeah.
Shut them down.
Let's try one more time. So what I want to emphasize is this. What we did was we ran the mixed logic that I already presented to you here. Then we estimated marginal willingness to pay for each attribute here. But that is not really the relevant thing, right? The relevant thing is how much they will pay in total for different contracts. In this case, we created these contracts, option 1, option 2, option 3. And then once we have that willingness to pay, that is the willingness to pay that we wanted to model in terms of the respondent characteristics and the community characteristics, which is here with an OLS. The important result here is the one I want to emphasize is, the people who had the community where they had ancestral ownership, they clearly were willing to pay a substantial amount of money for having their land rights. There was a difference between communities. San Martin, which was more farther, more remote, was less willing to pay. And the more land per family they had, the less they were willing to pay, which we interpret as they really were feeling that they didn't lose too much if they already have enough land per family. So just to summarize there, the willingness to pay or the preferences that you want to explain based on individual characteristics depend on your own study. Sometimes, like in the first study that I presented to you, you want to explain marginal willingness to pay. In some cases, which are more cases than I believe they have realized in the literature, you want to explain willingness to pay for contracts. And the reason why I am talking about that is because that is what usually relates to policy. Once you have created your discrete choice, everything, don't overlook, don't forget why you did it. Now I remember the question that someone asked me. Someone asked me, so if I want to keep a discrete choice experiment, or someone asked us, if I want to keep an alternative with this and this and this and these characteristics, how do I do it? You don't have to keep a specific alternative with a specific characteristics. But if for whatever reason that is an important contract, an important alternative, once you run the regressions, you can estimate the willingness to pay of the respondents for that alternative. If you think that that is the alternative that optimizes this, or that the government can really provide, or that, I don't know, that is the one that you want to later on see how the willingness to pay for that alternative varies by individual specific characteristics. Okay. I think that that's where I wanted to end.
Very good.
Well, we survived.
I know.
Any questions?
It's very intense.
Don't feel afraid. You can throw questions while I close the session.
We'll then have students' ideas.
Yeah. So that's what we are going to do. So today we would like to hear a little bit of your ideas.
Yeah, we'll just hear a little bit of that.
And then tomorrow we want to hear a lot about your ideas. So today give us a little bit of a taste. Sangeeta and I, we will be giving you feedbacks, throwing just basic feedback, and then include it. And tomorrow come ready to justify and defend your discrete choice experiment.
Yeah, you can sit wherever comfortable.
Let me see that. Go for it.
Yeah, we are the team of 6 to 7 people, and we, as far as we have discussed whatever, so I'll brief you about that. We will be discussing more about in further few hours. We are planning that choice set you told to describe. We have to describe that choice set or an alternative with attributes. So we are deciding on like in NCD there are some precautionary health behaviors. So we are taking 3 to 4 attributes of precautionary health behavior, like visiting OPD for the precautionary health checkups. Another one attribute like sugar intake, one more attribute like salt intake, and one more attribute for physical workout. Then the levels we are setting, like the prescribed consumption of salt in India is 2 gram per person per day. So we are taking the limit as less than 2 gram, 2 to 5 gram, and more than 5 gram. So less than 2 gram will denote the bad health, good health seeking behavior. 2 to 5 gram will moderate health seeking behavior, and more than 5 will denote the bad health seeking behavior. Similarly, for the other things like sugar, for 5 gram, 10 gram, and more than 10 gram, we are categorizing it at a good, moderate, bad health seeking behavior. Like in the car example, starring of cars, high 5 star, 4 star, 3 star, we are titling it as good health seeking behavior, moderate health seeking behavior, and bad health seeking behavior. So similarly, for the OPD visits, we are prescribed to have one OPD visit for our for our blood tests, regular blood test after the age of 35 for every 3 months or 6 months. So if we are visiting every 3 months, we are setting it for 3, more than 3, or less than 3 months. So similarly, it will be categorized as good health seeking behavior, moderate, and bad. So we are planning to get a policy package which we can market, and we can ask people to how willingly you are willing to pay for that package of health seeking behavior, to follow that health seeking behavior that will help you to go for workout, to consume less salt, to consume less sugar, to go for OPD visits. So like this we are planning.
That sounds interesting. But is it like they will be buying a little insurance for having that service, that medical service that will?
No, there will be a kind of nudge policy can be there. They will be getting daily reminders how much consumption of salt. So how, for a complete package of this following a good health seeking behavior, how much a person is willing to pay for it. So a policy package can be there.
Okay. But how will they pay?
How will they pay? That we have to figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we need to figure that one out. Think in terms of insurance. I don't know if in Mexico we have small providers of kind of a semi-insurance type of policy. Not really big providers that they say like pay me 100 pesos, which is very little, and then you can come and do your checkups with us, and then they do basic checkups. So it's like a very basic service that if you buy, sorry, thank you. A very basic service that if you buy, at least you know that you are not in terrible condition every 6 months. So something like that probably, if you guys have some of those services here, that will make it kind of realistic, the payment. Okay?
Yes, so actually, like we're on the same team. So, so I really liked your suggestion. So even when I was studying, so there is no insurance policy for the middle class people in India. So the insurance policies are quite high, and it's like Ayushman Bharat is there, but it is limited to certain section of the people. So maybe we can also look into like what services we can provide to the middle class, and how they can choose between like what is their preference. So that was also good for the policy thing.
So I'm in the same group too, and another thing that we were discussing there was like if you go to any of these medical applications where you buy medicines, so whether you're going for Apollo 1 mg, they always have these packages where you can subscribe to these services where you want like regular health checkups, or you want these packages to be sent to you for your medicines, for your food, that are specifically made for people with these current ailments, or like just even for preventative measures. Yeah. So yeah, that could be the product.
You should follow that type of example that already exists in the market. But something that will be a contribution will be what that is not in the market will your package be providing. Okay, what attribute is it there that is not already offered?
Actually, health insurance it is like it's more of curative.
Uh-huh.
You will be getting a treatment afterward, but we are working on preventive and precautionary
Exactly.
measures.
Exactly.
Like so, we can't rely on health insurance for that. So we need a different type of policy or something algorithms in our phones or kind of thing, which keep on nudging us to follow that good health seeking behavior.
Remember the
and
nudging.
moderate health seeking behavior.
Remember the nudging. I remember that when we talked for the
Yeah.
first time, the nudging was important.
Yeah.
So that because it's something that it seems that needs to be nudged in order for people
Yeah,
to...
it's in middle of not even compulsing you and not even liberating you from something, but it's something that would push you to boost you, motivate you to do that.
Very good.
Yeah, it's might be phone reminders, phone call reminders, message reminders, kind of thing.
Probably Sangeeta
That
has
would help
something to
you
say
too.
because it's part of your topic as well, right?
No, very interesting exercise that you guys are thinking, but I'll suggest that you start thinking in terms of what is your research question, what is your objective, what do you want to, estimate and aim at, what kind of trade-offs are you? Because when we do discrete choice experiments, we're thinking about trade-offs. So what are these trade-offs that you're thinking about modeling? That's my first suggestion. Second suggestion I have is that, when you're saying that 5 grams of salt, maybe put it in a manner that you can relate to. So do you know how much salt are you taking on a daily basis?
Ma'am, there is a 4 pinch in 2 grams. So for make it easy, usually the nutritionists and dietitians take it as a measure to for in a layman language, so you don't have to calculate every time.
That's what I was thinking. So I was thinking that maybe the innovative way of doing it would also be like a pack of chips, because you know how much salt is there. So those kind of trade-offs, that will you have it once a day or once a month. Similarly, sugar, instead of saying 5 grams of sugar, you could say that will you have dessert every day or just once a week? What's the trade-off from having it every day to once a week? And the trade-off would be that, okay, I can have my dessert, but I'll exercise for 1 hour.
Yeah.
Compensated.
Yeah. Right? So then there'll be a trade-off that, what do I want? I'm lazy. I'll say, okay, I don't eat my dessert, but maybe I'll eat my dessert and also work out for 1 hour.
Yeah.
So think about a little bit in terms of trade-offs and options which are more relatable. So I know a packet of chips, and it'll be written on that packet of chips how many grams of salt. So it's something, so nutritionists, they're saying 2 grams per day. But I mean, where does that 2 gram come from? So am I willing to give up my snacking? And, so just think a little bit about those trade-offs. And in terms of, so it's not about a medical insurance, it's more like a checkup plan which you have in mind. So preventive checkup plans.
Yes.
But, people don't need to do it every 3 months or something. That'll be too much, right? So maybe every 6 months. I don't know what is the recommended thing.
But that if we are targeting people of 35 and plus, so they are recommended to have
Every 3 months?
Every 6 months.
Yeah, maybe 6
People
months.
above 50, they are recommended every 3 months. Like this is the thing.
Really?
For glycosylated hemoglobin.
Yeah.
No,
How behind are we?
but interesting. But just think of, like making it a little bit of trade-off, bringing some trade-off, and something that you can relate to. Because, see, nobody wants to have too much salt. Salt is something that everybody is having something within a range. Because if I put too much salt in my dish, it's not even edible. Right? So within that range, you'll have to create something. And to me, it's more like, you include a snack that can I resist having that popcorn or chips? You go to a movie and can you resist having popcorns and cola? Because for sugar, it's like, cola. That has a lot of sugar. So just make it a little bit more relatable. Okay. Any suggestions from the group?
Can I complement a little bit? I really like how Sangeeta presented it. You should do. Oh, I have this one. You should do like a good illustration, probably with the products that are more related to like how many Coca-Colas you have to drink as much.
Yeah, you have to, give up.
Yeah. But then I also like how you said the exercise, right? Yeah, so you could include in the discrete choice experiment the measures that you could implement to compensate, because also if you have that kind of checkup and you have to pay for having the checkup, with the technology nowadays, if you allow the provider to have access to your phone, they know how many steps you are doing, or so that the price is tied to your level of exercise.
Yeah,
So you could do that type of that type.
bring in that. Just most of us have that map now.
Yeah.
Many steps. So
If you can show, so you can show that you did this many steps, and then you kept your sugar consumption under this, you will be paying this. And if you cannot, exactly, compensate. Yeah. It exists?
This scheme is already there in, I think, Galaxy Watch. This step thing. They made it a marketing scheme. So if you walk for a month, if you exceed some steps, so they will give you that much of discount in your bill.
yeah.
There is one marketing scheme like this.
Yeah, that's a good example. So
That's a good example.
Incorporate some.
Take advantage of that one to make it a health checkup kind of program, no? Because the thing is, walking is not enough, right? Like you need a medical provider to tell you, oh yeah, you are having walking, and you also, because sometimes what happens is you walk, but then you consume more sugar, and then and then you end up worse.
Yeah, you think, oh, today I did so much of workout.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. We have one hand there. Thank you. Thank you, health team. We are going to call you health team.
You guys have started thinking about it. We're really glad about it.
Yeah.
I was thinking if they could add this element that if they follow this particular plan for a month or 2 months, they could get some discount on the next month checkups.
Exactly.
So that could be one of the nudges they can have.
Yeah. That could work as a nudge. Very good. You are the health team. The healthy team. Who else? Here, we have one hand here.
You can also introduce yourself.
So I'm Ishita from CITD department, JNU.
MA first year.
And we have formed a group of 3, and we are planning to design a DCE on circular economy in clothing, where our goal is to understand the willingness of the people to switch from a fast fashion industry to a more sustainable industry for fashion, so that we can reduce the overconsumption of resources in that sphere. So for this, we are planning to use earth codings, like as we discussed in the examples here for cars and fridges, we were using stars, high label, low label. So here we are planning to use earth codes like green, yellow, orange, red, which will show the environmental impact and the sustainability, how sustainable is the material. And for that, we are planning to use some attributes. There are 6 attributes. The first one being material, where we have divided it based on low, moderate, and high sustainability. Then we have durability based on washes and the number of years the clothing might last. Then we have take back programs, like whether it is recyclable or not. Then we also have price, biodegradability, and performance. Performance is based on stain resistance and sweat absorbance of the material. And for price, as we had seen here, determining the prices based on the graph where it was between 80% and 20% variation, we have also conducted a small survey through a Google form to get the down the sloping curve and check if we are getting it that way. So we have researched a bit about the prices, like what can be the cheapest, what can be the most expensive, and we have taken a lot of prices in between and put it up in a Google form where people have responded how much they are willing to pay, and we are getting a
what is the
downward
range?
sloping curve.
Do you
It's-
have already the range?
Yeah, it's from 350 rupees to 1250. It's for a t-shirt based, considering a conventional cotton t-shirt as the baseline, we are considering the price to be 500, and from 350 to
Indian rupees.
It's like €5,
Yeah.
350, €5
to 1250, 1250.
15 euros.
It doesn't seem too crazy.
That
It seems like a reasonable number. Yeah. Very
So-
good. I mean, with the technology nowadays, you can do a lot very fast. Very good.
Yes.
Something I wanted to tell you about that is one, if you could kindly send me an email to remind me later today because I don't have internet. But one student of mine did that finished her master, did a discrete choice experiment with this motivation. The attributes were very different. She went for how much will you pay for buying clothes that include repairment, so that you don't have to throw them or you don't have to, so that you can repair them for as long as you need it. But then she has a lot of the introduction, a lot of literature review. It's going to be helpful for you to get into the topic. So I'm going to send it to you if you send me an email to remind
Sure,
me.
sir, sure.
And the other thing is, some of the things that you are presenting are good. Just consider doing also your semi-structured interviews and your focus groups, because durability, of course, you want to give up fast fashion. So I can see how that is an important one. But the ranges also are interesting. I don't know for the rest of the people, but I have, probably should not say, but some of my clothes I have been using for at least 10, 15 years. And to me, that is just amazing. But I know I have noticed in younger people that they are not happy if you tell them that. Like too long is like 5 years, right? So do your semi-structured interviews to know how long it will be too long without getting people scared.
Yes, so the duration and the longevity attribute is also representing a trade-off with the fashion trends. If I purchase a cheap cloth like polyester or nylon or something, not nylon, like viscose or rayon, which does not last very long. So that might work with the fashion trends because I'm paying less for it, and it is a trendy cloth compared to what is going on and in fashion right now. It is not lasting very long. I'm spending less on it. So after 2 or 3 years, I buy another one which is consistent with the fashion trend going on then. Compared to that, if I buy something made of organic hemp, which is really very expensive, about 80% of the base price of conventional cotton, and it will last very long. But it also matters that if I want to go on with the type of a t-shirt that is not going to be trendy 10 years later, but it will last till that time, and am I willing to spend around 1,000 or more amount than that on such a piece of clothing?
Oh, you have a really interesting topic. Now I am thinking whether the t-shirt or the pants should be the case, right? What do we want to keep longer? I mean, I am also thinking on the age of the respondent, because if you ask a 15-year-old, I don't think we have too much hope. And I also think that we should let them be responsible, because, you know, it's not like I was a very responsible one. But then we probably should be asking people what, maybe 25 and above.
Yeah. So
Right? That we at least that age, we probably should try to ask people to be thinking more responsibly.
The survey we did had mostly younger age groups, like college students and
College and above.
yeah, college students who are mainly more concerned about fashion trends.
Yeah.
It was for the price range, and then we are just making
still
choice
18
sets as of
plus,
now.
right?
Yeah, 18 plus.
It's
18
about
plus.
20.
Okay.
18 to 24, 25.
That's when people start getting responsible. Okay.
And after we make the choice sets, when we can send people the choice sets, then we'll be able to make distinctions, like how they are able to how they are presenting their preferences, because we are planning to make 4 to 6 choice sets which will help us determine how do they respond to the coding factor.
Because in some choices we have a lot of attributes that are similar in the two, but a few attributes that are different, which will help us determine if coding is important for them, if longevity is important for them, or other factors.
Perfect. Okay.
That's
One general comment I will make is that don't forget to start thinking on your questions prior to the discrete choice experiment. What do we want to know about these people in terms of perceptions, in terms of social network, in terms of intrinsic motivation? For instance, in your case, probably more than in the first case, intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation should matter. In our results, one of the important things is extrinsic motivation. When people were extrinsically motivated, that's when the network effect remains. And it was something between 40 and 50% of the people. So half of the people need to be extrinsically motivated. So that will be interesting to also document in your study, because basically maybe, just maybe, it becomes trendy to be more responsible when wearing the clothes if an influencer gets on board of the campaign, no? And that could come out from your study.
The social network might be an important factor here. So I just wanted to ask if we already have 6 attributes. So if I add another one, it becomes 7. So we don't want a lot of attributes as well.
For tomorrow, as many as you want.
Then I'll add a social network attribute. I think that is important for them.
Tomorrow, Sangeeta and I will be destroying it so that you build a better one. So for tomorrow, bring your best options and whatever you have thought. And tomorrow we discuss it.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Very good.
Very nice.
Bravo.
Clap for all these proposals. Within 3 days, they've been able to think.
Yeah. We have one more there.
One more, Khushi. There, Bhavna.
I am Bhavna from CSRD JNU. So we are a group of 5 people, and we thought that we should work on solid waste management. And we had a very good discussion with sir also yesterday. So we all know that it is a very big issue, and almost 50% of the waste that is being generated by in the area in India is not actually recycled. It either goes to the landfills or either it is unaccounted. So we wanted to target. There could be different levels at which this segregation can happen, but we want to target it at the household level. So basically, what if we plan to motivate the households to segregate their waste and then dispose. Then they send it to the garbage. The person who comes for collecting the garbage. So we were thinking of different type of questions which we could look at, but we here want to create a hypothetical scenario that government is planning to come up with an action plan for the solid waste management, and it will be charging fees for the garbage collection. So basically we did a quick call to a few people and tried to understand, and based on our experiences at our houses, what is the scenario. So this situation is based in Gurgaon. What happens there is there could be either a public waste collector or a private waste collector. A public waste collector usually comes with a van, and it charges a nominal fees from say rupees 30 to rupees 50 every month to collect the garbage, and there is no segregation happening. And if there is a private waste collector, it charges somewhere around 100 to 150 rupees per month, and again no waste segregation is happening. So the hypothetical scenario could be that government is planning to come up with a garbage collection fees which could range in between 100 to 150 rupees, and you could get a rebate on this if you segregate your waste. Then we have different attributes in this. The first would be number of days of collection. Current scenario is that the daily the garbage is being collected, so we could vary these number of days. Second would be segregation. Segregation into no segregation is the current scenario. There could be 2 levels, which is segregating it into dry and wet waste, or segregating it into wet waste, recyclable waste, and non-recyclable dry waste. So basically 3 types of segregations. Then there could be a rebate, which obviously I thought that we could keep it in percentage terms, like ranging from 20% rebate on the fees to say 60% rebate on the fees that is the government is charging monthly. The fourth would be the peer effect or the social effect, that what if 30% of your neighbors agree to this particular choice set, or what if 60% of the neighbors agree to this particular. So we can have 4 attributes and different choice sets based on these attributes.
Yeah, I like it. I pre-like it yesterday, so I have few extra comments, but what do you think, Sangeeta?
No, I mean, solid waste management is really an important problem in all these densely populated countries. The waste that's been generated in Delhi.
Yeah.
And governments have been talking about it, even in my colony. Every month there is something like they're doing segregation, but I know nothing is happening. Even if at a household level I segregate, the person who's coming to collect garbage is going to mix everything.
Yeah.
So in Gurgaon, ma'am, what we have, what government planned, I was looking at some document also yesterday. They have these vans that come and collect the segregated waste. They were designed to do that, but they started with it for few months and then people stopped segregating it. So they actually don't have any incentive to do that, even if the government is taking some efforts in that direction.
Yeah, so
I have one good story though, like in the sense that. So in Bengaluru though, like where my parents live, BBMP has been doing this since I was in 8th grade. So that was back in 2013. So they've been doing it and it's been going on, like what you just said, that they did not continue with it, but it's still on. The biggest issue there though is the fact that people are working. So not everyone is at home. That's the only thing that people are willing to pay. So that's the price that people generally try to calculate, because these are BBMP workers, public workers, but people pay them extra. Okay, fine, if you live on the 3rd floor, if you live on the 4th floor, you don't want to come down with your waste, if you have a lift, if you don't have a lift. So those are the bigger questions, but it is happening, at least in Bengaluru. It's like a very big thing. It's been going on for like more than a decade. Absolutely, like it's they will not take your waste otherwise. They will just refuse to take it. Like like your sanitary waste is separate, your plastic, dry waste, wet waste. Even in wet waste, like I said, there are so many categories. If you have like, for example, glass bottles or electronic waste, it's very well done there.
Yeah, that's really good to know, because it's not happening in Delhi, and we really need to do it. But yes, we want to understand what will incentivize people to do it, or what are the barriers, and why it's not happening.
I will read about the case. If there is some reference that you could refer to her or anecdotal of any kind, so that also she gets a kind of what makes it successful, and that could help her to also to the design.
I have something to add to this. So my parents live in East Kidwainagar. It's near INA and Southex. So there the waste segregation is perfectly done. So what happens is the person comes, you need to segregate your waste. So 4 types of dustbins have been given to us. We need to do that. If any of the houses is not doing it, then what they do is the RWA will put their name, and as a kind of punishment that will be put on the notice board. So then people are really scared of it. And
nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's been very successfully.
Let's try that one. I mean, the cool thing is do some piloting, do some interviewing, and see if people will get scared of that, and then you have it.
This is also your PhD topic?
It should.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good PhD topic. So women are taking the lead. Oh, where are men?
Ma'am, there's one more.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
but a guy wants.
Is there any online which they want to share? Just check. Okay, yeah, you can introduce yourself. Meanwhile,
Hi, I'm Sanskriti. I'm doing my master's from CITD. So the problem that we wanted to tackle with our DCE was actually the declining labor force participation rates seen among women in India. So the exact problem that we were looking at was how job time requirements serve as a barrier to entry for women. Right, so we have seen and how that contributes to the gender wage gap. Right, so a lot of literature on this field suggests that there are preferences for occupational attributes which are different within the genders, right? Women have different preferences for occupational attributes that cause them to sort into lower paying jobs, right? And these attributes are usually attributes that allow like family compatibility, right? You get time to for childcare and such things, right? And but a problem with estimating that empirically has been that the data that we see is usually like the equilibrium outcome, right? It's the result of individual preferences as well as employer preferences and the particular job attributes. So we want to see whether like how much women are willing to pay, right? Okay, so another thing that I would like to point out is employer preference. By that I don't particularly mean that there's discrimination, but something like women might have lower human capital, right? Women might be less educated or some issues like that that might not fit into the job profile. So we want to see how much of the gender wage gap is actually caused due to personal preferences, women's individual preferences for more time flexible jobs, which end up being lower paying jobs as well, right? So we were thinking of actually looking at attributes like childcare facilities and there's also literature on an existing female peer group and how that influences one's decision to enter the workforce, and we wanted to see how much of their wages they're willing to give for more flexible jobs, or would they actually end up taking higher paying jobs if these facilities were available. So we are still in the process of designing it, so if you have any suggestions as to what other attributes we could include, that would be
again very relevant and interesting thing, and I think discrete choice is actually relevant here because market data will have indigeneity and self-selection. So this, this literature has already documented that the data, observable data, will have self-selection and indigeneity problems. So you can't address this problem with observational data or market data, and therefore discrete choice is really important. And actually Aden has worked on remote working, so maybe you can talk about that. That's one thing you can include, that would women like if they had the option of working from home or working remotely. So I think he'll like to add on that.
I had some reactions, but the first thing I want to highlight is from now on, how I try to motivate how market data sometimes has limitations, and I try to use the housing and but from now on I'm going to use also the example of how to document wage gap. The market data cannot necessarily help us because endogeneity and self-selection and everything. So that's the one thing, and thank you for bringing that up. The other one is very important topic, and it is true that the Discrete Choice experiment can help us if we get smart. I'm trying to get smart quickly. I don't have a quick reaction. One of them definitely remote working should be something that will allow people to get better jobs if that is something that they want. Something important is going to be the pre-Discrete Choice experiment questions, because there, to me, what is very important is for you to gather what I will call the inherent preference of the specific woman, and I don't know how to call them, if goals in life or aspirations or
one study
right? Yeah. So there you probably have something. Perceptions.
And yeah, we're looking at their what are we calling this? The aspirations, perceptions, goals, and their network. So their network. So that these are some of the things that we're looking at. Actually, we're doing one study. It's not DCE, but that's observational data, and we are doing that in academia. And I'm just sharing with everyone. We're seeing that how women's career progression is getting affected by some of these things, and we are collecting very large data from maybe over 100 institutes in India. And we're going to department and collecting data for each and every woman
and men faculty member and seeing that what happens over the career, is it that men get promotions earlier than women, and what could be the factors. So we are doing that. But to you, I'll add one more factor, which will be safety at workplace. So maybe some women don't want to go out and work because they don't feel it's either the commute is very safe, or maybe the workplace is very safe. In academic departments still we are very safe, but in many other places it may not be very safe, or at least the perception is that we could be exploited or some abuse, and that could also be a reason. So maybe you can find out, so one of the things could be that a safer working place. That's one thing you can.
In this project, we're also using norms.
Yeah, social norms. Yeah, we are also doing, social norms about things.
Yeah, in this topic, I will definitely go and sit down a little bit and learn about whether there are some battery of questions to gather this kind of aspirations, perceptions, social norms, because they are going to be very important in the moment that you present them to the discrete choice experiment. I need to think a little bit more about, in addition to safety, teleworking, childcare, that should matter. I need to think a little bit more.
The presence of POSH, that is Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act,
Uh-huh.
have a national level act, whether it is being implemented or not.
That should matter. Exactly, that's a good way to proxy safety, for instance.
I was actually thinking that we wanted to focus on hours of work, so hours of labor supplied. Also, because we have seen all of these papers where policies that were actually introduced to increase wages, right, giving tax rebates and things like that, that actually women started substituting. So like the wage increase did not have the increase in labor supply that we had expected. Like the people at the corner solution, they started supplying labor. So the women who weren't working entered the workforce. So labor force participation rates went up, but the hours of work did not actually get affected by it. So if we have if we are seeing that jobs with higher hours of work are actually paying more, then policies like that will not end up addressing the wage gap, right? So that was a question that we wanted to look into.
Yeah.
That's an important question. Maybe women want to work half a day.
Yeah, but the reason for that is what we are trying to figure out. So how to get women to supply more labor, maybe, so that the wage gap can get bridged.
Perfect. I'm going to think a little bit more for tomorrow. You just gave me a good homework. One more. We have time for one more.
We have time for one more. So yeah, I'm glad. You can't allow women to take lead.
No, that's not issue with me. So I want to add.
You can introduce yourself.
I am Ajay Kumar, and I am doing my PhD from CIT department, and I have tech supervisor Sangeeta ma'am.
Very good.
And I want to add one more thing to that. I think we can also consider the what is the income level of household, because if we see if the household is with the very poor income level, then in that condition women they want the women to work outside the because they want the income support in that condition. But if we see the in the higher income group people, the willingness to work from the household side, like the parents and also that I think will it reduces they do not want their child to go out. And also in that condition we can also consider the it based on the caste as well, because if we see in in the sense of upper caste people, so the Brahmins are not this segregation, but in the upper caste in India there is there is less willingness to send the.
So that's like a social norm.
Social norm, and also the income level of household is also the one of the things which can impact.
And income, and that makes me think that for purpose of your study, you have to think on the population. So I imagine the discrete choice experiment has to vary by sector, population, income. So there you have to get it right in terms of, I would like to tackle upper or middle income households, or lower income. I mean, but then the attributes should differ, because I am guessing what the factors are also depend on the income of the household. So we have to control for the household income, but also when you come to what is the population, you have to be very precise in terms of income. Very good.
Okay, yeah. So, any further proposal? You guys were Tamanna. You said you guys are thinking about it.
something to sir in the morning, so
You can talk about it. We have, or unless there is another, because we have time for just one more.
so I have to modify it.
That's okay. Just it's a general idea at the moment.
It was a good one. I like it.
So, ma'am, I thought about consumers' preference as well. So I thought, so my title is the bibliophile, no, the reader's dilemma. A discrete choice experiments on consumers' preference, whether they are choosing used books or e-books over the new books that are coming in the market. So my attributes would be, one is the edition of the book, whether it's a standard edition or the first edition or a signed copy by the author, and how people are choosing this kind of books over the other. And for ebooks, we'll give some climate nudge, by choosing this book, you are saving 2 trees. This is one kind of climate nudge. And so I was thinking on that line. I've forgotten about the other attributes. I have to see.
It's different, and
I like it.
Kind of
my first reaction when I saw it is that it is an interesting topic, because it is not obvious to me what is the environmental cost of the e-book.
Yes.
So it's obvious that when you have a paper book, it's 2 trees, but I don't know about the e-book.
Yeah, I'm also thinking data storage takes so much.
Data storage, aluminum, lithium battery.
Sir was suggesting was something like in terms of resources. When we are using ebook, how much we are using lithium or kind of or such kind of things. And one of my attributes is also price, which looks at the economic side of choosing the book. And I have leveled it like the discount, 30% off from the MRP or 40% off. I have documented it in this way. And the other thing is the condition of the book, whether it's used and fair or brand new or just new. So I've done this in this way.
Space aspect also matters, right? Like those who prefer e-bills because they can carry wherever they want. Otherwise, you have to think for.
Yes, I was even thinking that we could add the thing whether it's instantly deliverable, like ebook, we can get it instantly, but not the new book. We have to go to a bookshop to purchase that. I was thinking on that line too, about ease of obtaining the book.
You can also add about the screen time, because these days
Yeah.
we are
So that would be the trade-off.
Switching back to reading books because there is a lot of screen time.
Yes.
Difficult choice.
Yeah, that would be the trade-off part.
Yeah. Screen time.
So, any other ideas? Somebody just wants to throw in ideas, even if it's not a full-fledged project. Or
I had just a slight question, and this has to do with more my PhD thesis topic, not so much here, but I was just thinking, just trying to formulate that, and I was thinking about consultancies themselves and the way that they come up with solutions. For example, that's something that's a huge part of. So I work on transportation itself, as in I'm trying to look at India-Japan cooperation when it comes to transport systems themselves. So I was thinking, all these solutions, they come from consultancies. So for players like that, where you aren't really looking at people, you're looking at governments and agencies and maybe I don't know, more of what suitability and that sort of studies. So how does DCE fit into something like that? Like what are the attributes there, and like can you really attach something to it? Can you say that, oh, is it right, is it wrong? Like as a PhD scholar that is working in social sciences, I could bring it down to are people, how do people like it, and how do these private players look at it? So do you think that's something that is a possibility in that sense?
Yes, you could do something similar to what we did in the paper with in line titling, where you find someone that is working in the private sector and say, assume that you are going to provide an opinion, an expert opinion on the following a scenario. What will you recommend? And that actually reminds me, there is another part of my research that goes into expert elicitation. So to me, it looks more like you want to consult the opinion on an expert and what that expert would recommend to do, and which scenario you will present it in the form of a discrete choice experiment, but you are asking an opinion as an expert.
There won't be so many respondents then, like if you have 500 in this, that's a very reliable number to go by, but in a study like this it would be much lesser than that.
Actually, the cool thing with expert elicitation is that it can be done with 10 experts. Right. So we can talk about that, because actually that is another thing we could discuss, but yeah, it is possible to do it with 10 depending on the specific question. I can show you some literature. Perfect.
Okay, so